Hello, I'm Jodie from Tales of Cloth, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sweet honeydew block, which is one of the hexagon blocks in my Hexi handbook that you can find in the shop. So the first thing we're going to do is cut and baste our diamonds. And I like to use scraps or strips like this. And I just place my paper piece over the fabric, make sure that I've got approximately 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then cut the diamond to shape. And I grab the next one, place it in there, cut to shape. I use ordinary glue stick to baste my quilts. I make sure that I get it in small sticks like this so that I've got a small tip. And when I'm basting diamonds, I always start on the right hand side of the wide angle, and I baste in the same direction every time. I move my diamond anti-clockwise, and I have a blog post all about this on my blog that I'll link below. But when I baste this way, all of my diamonds have their tails facing the same direction, and that means that once I stitch them together, those tails are going to nest nicely and be easy to press flat. Okay, I use Aurifil 50 weight thread and Bowen milliner's needles, and I use a quilting knot at the end of my thread. Now, I always start before I sew my two shapes together, I lay them out flat so that I have the seam where I'm going to sew them together touching, and that way when I fold it over I know that I've got the right seam that I'm going to sew. I always line up my diamonds on every side and not just at the point that I'm going to start, because you might be able to see, because of the way the fabric folds at the point, this bit comes out a tiny bit further than this one. And so we don't get tricked by the fabric that we've added to the shape, I like to line it up on all sides. Those tails sometimes get in the way, catching the fabric. We just do our best to work around them. Move that one out of the way and stitch along the seam. Okay, when I get to this point, I'm going to sew a couple of stitches in the one spot just to keep it steady. Open it up, place the next diamond out flat where I want it to be, and then fold it over so that I've got the right seams aligned. Line it up on all sides. And continue stitching. When I get to the end of the seam, I'm going to stitch a couple of times in that corner, and then in the final stitch I'm going to put the needle through that loop a couple of times and pull it to make a knot. And there's my half star. Next we sew the two halves together, and you're going to have tails and maybe the point coming out a little bit further, but they're not going to bother us. because it's all gonna work out in the end. Line up the star, focusing on matching up these points. Start at this end and sew all the way across the seam. And then I'm just going to wobble things a little bit. Move them so that they line up. And I've stitched a couple of times in that corner, and now I'm going to stitch a couple of times in this one. Put the needle through the loop and pull. And there's a finished star with a lovely point in the center. Now it's time to add our jewels, and they're going to ring around the star like a wreath. And it doesn't really matter which direction they go, it fits either way. It is important that you choose the same direction every time. So I have mine going in a clockwise direction. So I'm going to lift our star up, take our first piece and remember where it went, because we don't want to accidentally sew it in like that or like that. It goes here. So it's very important in this step to lay it out flat in the correct position first before folding it over and lining up that seam. Once I get to the end of the seam here, I'm just going to stitch a couple of times in that point, open it out. Now you can see that there's a little gap here, but I'm not going to worry about that. I am going to fold this paper piece so that I can line up the next seam and stitch until I've gotten to the end of the diamond. Now once I get to the end of that diamond, I'm going to make a knot again. Snip the thread, open out my unit. Okay, so even though our pieces are facing in a way clockwise, we're actually going to take this piece next, because we've created this long line here, so it's much easier to sew this seam than it is to put that one in there. So we're going to put that one in next and then work our way around the block. Okay, there's the second jewel attached to the block. Next up we do this one. In some of these edges, the diamond sticks up a little bit beyond the jewel, and I'm just going to force it into place, and once the papers are removed, it'll sit flat and be pressed fine. Next one. Okay, for this final piece, you can start, depending on which direction you feel most comfortable sewing, you can start from here to there. Or sew on this side. I've found just in making these blocks that I tend to start on this edge here. Line up those two seams, and I've run out of thread. Move all the tails and threads out of the way. Stitch a couple of times in that corner. Open it out and fold the block so that the next two seams are lined up. Move the tails out of the way. And then stitch up the final seam. And there's your finished beautiful honeydew block. You can find the pattern for the honeydew quilt in the Hexie handbook in my shop, and the EPP kit in my shop also. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.